Welcome to My Life. I'm John Ochins, and we are very pleased to have Char Sutherby with us today. You're probably familiar with Char's name. She's been around these parts for a few years. She's a very prominent member of the Leonard-Oxford community. She's been on the Leonard Village Council for over 20 years. She's a big part of the Main Street program and the preservation of the Leonard Mill and other historical activities around Leonard. She's on our Cable Commission and has been for 10 years, and we're very grateful for your service there. And she's been a big part of the Strawberry Festival in Leonard for over 25 years. But she's only lived in Leonard for 45 years, so she's a short timer, and you'll have to forgive her if she doesn't quite remember everything about the community. But we're pleased to have you with us, Char. Thanks for showing up.
Thank you for having me.
Tell me a little bit about this year's Strawberry Festival. How did that go?
I think it went really well. We had a lot of volunteers. I get a hold of the school, and the Honor Society lets the kids know that for credit they can be volunteers, and we were blessed with a lot of kids this year, and they were mature, responsible young people. I was just delighted with all of them, and they did as they were asked, and they were polite, and that's great. So that part went well.
Are those mostly high school kids you're
those
talking
are
about?
High school kids, yes. It was awfully hot, so a lot of people came for the parade and had their ice cream, and quite a few left. I mean, we still ended up with a nice crowd, but not as big as what it is normally. Nice day, but very hot day.
Tell me a little bit about the history of the Strawberry Festival. I'm not from these parts, and maybe we've got a few viewers who aren't real familiar with it, but how did that all come about?
It started with the original fire department. This small group of men and women, and it was all men that were on the department, and they needed money for equipment. There just wasn't any money, and so they had a Strawberry Festival, and their monies would go to buy equipment. And I believe in the beginning, because I've had some people tell me they actually helped pick those berries. They picked the berries, and they had their festival, and you have to know it wouldn't have been as big as what we have now, but so that's how it started, that's what it was. And when I came to Leonard 45 years ago, it was strawberries and ice cream, that was it. And I was from the country, so I wasn't really used to festivals, but festival to me said it would be more than strawberries and ice cream. And apparently Sandra Walensik thought so too, because she's the one who actually went to council and said, I want to put a festival on, I want to have a parade and expand this. And there was a lot of opposition to it in the beginning because...
When would this have been, roughly?
I want to say 1980, 82, somewhere's in there. And there were certain firemen who felt it had been their day, it should only be their day. But we really have enhanced their day. It's still their day, but we bring more people, more interest in, more families.
So what kind of other stuff do you have going on? Tell me a little more about the festival itself and what people can expect to see if they go there.
Well, started last year, the library put a 5K run, and they call it Born to Run, Born to Read. Born to Read, I think, is what their logo is. And they bring a lot of people in the morning, and there's a lot of interest around that. There's a pancake breakfast, then there's the parade. And you know, nothing really happens before 10 o'clock in the morning, but I'm telling you, if you go out at 6 o'clock in the morning, you can feel the excitement in the air, and there are people there. And I compare it to a little book that I used to read my kids when they were little, called The Day the Circus Came to Town. And it's a story of a little boy and his daddy who are going to go to the circus, and how excited the little boy is and how tired he is at night. That's what Strawberry Festival is to me. And you can actually feel the excitement. People are out, they're having their coffee, but they're watching, they're waiting, and for the events to unfold. We have a lot of children's events. There's a petting farm. There's Sheep Shank Sam, who brings old-time tools for the logging era of our state, and he shows children how those tools would be used. There's pony rides. There's we get the blow-up things from the county, you know, the bounce house, all that kind of stuff. And then at night there's a street dance, and all are well attended.
So it's about a lot more than strawberries, it sounds like.
It is.
So do they still raise the money for the fire department, or are they raising money for different things now?
The Strawberry Festival is, actually our name is Leonard Summer Festival Committee. And the Village of Leonard sanctioned that group to put on the Strawberry Festival events. And they are responsible for all the events that I've talked about. The only thing the firemen do are the strawberries and ice cream. The strawberries and ice cream, their funds go to things that they do in the community, like helping families that need help at Christmas time, Halloween things for kids. That's what their monies go to. And they help families not just at Christmas. Sometimes you'll have, there'll be a need for a family that can't afford to heat their home. And they've helped in those areas, or a fire or something like that. But the monies generated by the Summer Festival Committee go to put on the event for the next year. And sometimes if they have extra funds, they will use it within the community. We have also helped families in need. Last year we gave monies to Leonard School for families that were in need at Christmas time.
That's wonderful. You're also just a tiny bit interested in the history of our area, aren't you?
Oh yeah.
And preservation of certain historic structures and so forth.
I really am.
All right, I think the mill in Leonard is one of your most recent concerns, isn't that correct?
It is. It breaks my heart to see these old buildings starting to decay and go into ruin because no one is taking care of them. And a lot of it is they don't have the funds to take care of it. But if you look, there are ways out there to get money to take care of these buildings. I'm not skilled on the computer, but there are those who are. And so I've been working with a group out of Rochester, for one, the Rochester Heritage Group, and they are helping to generate funds for the mill, helping to write grants for the mill. If you look on the Leonard Village site, there is a great pictorial display of the mill and its history. And another thing that I do once a year, I take the kids from Leonard School on a history walk. I don't take all the kids, usually it's the second graders. And now this year I didn't take them on a walk. I did a presentation at school. And my in-laws, John and Mary Sue. John was one of the original firemen, and Mary Sue had been a cook at Leonard School for years. And so I had one of her dresses, her glasses, and went to Leonard School as Mary Sue and did a presentation with the kids and had lots of fun with that.
I bet they were fascinated by that.
Well, they wanted to know if my shoes were hers too. And I
Is
said,
that right?
No, they're my shoes.
She wasn't your size.
No, she's not.
Hey, before I forget, how old is the old mill building?
I want to say, I'm not positive, but late 1800s.
Ah, so it goes back a ways.
Yeah.
Yeah. You were talking about some of your husband's ancestors and wearing their clothes and that sort of thing. I want to talk about some of your ancestors. First of all, where were you born? Were you born around here?
No, I was born in Cadillac Hospital, Cadillac Mercy. And the reason that I was born there...
Cadillac, Michigan, right?
Cadillac, Michigan. I grew up in a small town called Falmouth, actually in the country outside of Falmouth, but it was during the war. And my dad was in the service, and so because he was in the service, I could be born in the hospital. Out of 8 kids, only 2 of us were born in the hospital, and that was because the war was on.
Okay. I'm going to stop you right there for just a second because we have to take a break, but
okay.
We'll be right back with Char Sutherby. Don't go away.
A small town with a lot of heart and history. A hidden gem with a sense of community. Welcome to Leonard.
Back in My Life with Char Sutherby from Leonard, Michigan, and you were just telling us how you were born in the Cadillac hospital in Cadillac, Michigan.
Yes.
And how this was during the war, and because of that, you were able, your mother was able to be admitted to that hospital.
Yes.
Why don't you continue the story there?
I went to Falmouth Elementary, which only went kindergarten through 8th grade, small community school, and from there I went to high school in McBain, Michigan.
Okay, where you went to in Falmouth, tell me, did your folks own a farm, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I grew up on a farm, and my stepdad, my parents were divorced before I was born, so I never even met my own dad till I was 18. So I grew up on this farm, and my stepdad raised us, and he had a lot of heart issues, and so because of that, he could not work. He had been working on road construction. He had to quit that kind of work, and he became a carpenter. His dad was a finish carpenter, which he could build beautiful, beautiful things. And his son could be what they call like a day laborer. He did not have those skills. And so northern Michigan, homes were only built, say, from April till October. Because of the cold,
Sure.
They wouldn't build houses year-round. And so he was only like a part-time worker in that respect, but my mother went to work in the factory, and he would get us up in the morning for school, fix breakfast, and send us off
so
to school.
who worked the farm?
Well, he and his father had worked the farm, and long about the time he married my mom, or shortly thereafter, he stopped farming.
Oh, I see.
Because with 8 kids, it wasn't enough money to support them. If I can back it up a little bit, he was a 40-year-old bachelor who met my mother with 5 kids.
Wow.
And how he met my mother is he had this collie puppy, and that puppy kept coming over to our house to play. And he'd have to keep coming and rescuing his dog. And he met my mother, and
Do you think he did that on purpose?
anything's possible. And so they got married, they had 3 more kids, but if you can imagine, it was tough to make a living for 8 kids and 2 adults.
So your mom and your siblings were around for a while before she married
Yes.
your stepdad.
Yes.
Did you ever know any of your grandparents?
Oh yes, my mother's dad died when I was 5, but I can remember him. And my grandma didn't die till I was 13, and I loved going to grandma's and spending time with her.
That must have been, I bet you did, and I'll bet you spent a lot of time with her in view of the circumstances and everything.
Yeah, well, we lived on the farm with them for a short time before Mom and my stepdad got married.
Yeah. So how did your mom support you guys before she remarried?
I have no idea, other than probably Grandpa and Grandma, and she may did odd jobs, I don't know, because they were not close to town. And I don't believe there were social programs at that time, welfare programs that
Yeah.
would give money for families. So
Right.
Grandpa still had cows, I can remember that. And so I would assume that's how they supported themselves.
Okay, so where did you go to grade school?
Falmouth, Michigan.
Was it a little like country school, or was it a big
little
school?
country school. In fact, when we were going there, it was considered a very modern school because it hadn't been built that long. It wasn't like even Leonard School or some of the older ones here in Oxford. It was fairly new. I think it was opened in the 50s.
Did you feel, I mean, we're going back a few years here, and divorce wasn't as prominent then as
No.
it is now.
No.
Did you feel kind of unusual being in the circumstances that you were, trying to mix in with the class?
We were, it was considered different, and we were a large family. People had kids of families of 5 or 6, but not of 8 or more. And yeah, it was considered. And my mother married a migrant worker, which set her totally apart from others in the community.
Okay, was that?
My biological dad was a migrant
I see.
worker. And so, like I said, we were darker skinned, and my younger siblings are all very fair and blonde. So that
Quite a mixture.
Quite a mixture. My grandpa on mother's side was Dutch. His wife was English. My mother married a migrant worker. So you put all that together, that's quite a combination.
Did you ever try and trace your heritage back to find out who stepped foot on this country first?
I have worked on it some. Now on my mother's side, they trace themselves back to the Netherlands. And it is interesting, and there's, they have their tree well in place. My dad's side is much more difficult. I have gone back to Texas. He was born in Uvalde, Texas in 1905. Now, right shortly after that, the courthouse burned, so his records are gone. And my grandmother came over from Zaragoza, Mexico to have him. I don't know if she came because she knew she was going to have a baby soon and he'd be a U.S. citizen, or if she just happened to be here. A lot of that information just simply isn't there. He was the youngest of 4 kids, and I'm not even sure if all 4 were brother and sister or if they just happened to be together, because a lot of their culture, if they were coming to the United States, they just brought them along.
What brought them to Michigan?
Work. You know, they came up to work as laborers, picking cherries, picking beans, whatever. When I grew up, there were all kinds of migrant workers in northern Michigan that helped farmers.
At what point did they buy a farm?
My parents, now my mother and my biological dad never had a farm.
Oh.
And my grandparents, I don't know what point they bought a farm, but they had been tenant farmers prior to owning their own farm. They worked on this large farm that is now owned by Michigan State. It is a farm that they do a lot of testing of feed and with animals in northern Michigan. But when my mother was a young woman, they were tenant farmers on that farm.
Were times tough for you guys before your mother remarried, or?
You know, I'm not aware of it. I would, when my mother married my stepdad, I was 4. And my sister, there was a younger sister who was just a little more than a baby. So I'm sure they were, but I wasn't aware of it.
So tell me, okay, you were telling me about this interesting mixture of kids between your stepbrothers and sisters and yourselves. And how many kids were there all together again?
8.
8 kids. What did you guys do for fun?
We had the best time. When Mom married Howard, we were living on the front of 80 acres, and we could play anywhere on that 80 acres that we chose, and we did. We had forts out in the woods. Our imaginations ran wild. We knew there were Indians. There was none of those things, but we had big imaginations.
Okay, I'm going to pause for just a minute because we have to take a break. So hold that thought. We'll be right back.
Hey Lakeville, you're watching OCTV.
Hi, my name's Karen from Canine Stray Rescue. We're located at 2120 Metamora Road, just north of town in Oxford. We're an animal rescue here. We take in dogs. We have about 50 dogs here right now that are available for adoption. Before the dogs are adopted out, they are spayed or neutered. They're up to date on the rabies and distemper shots, and we also heartworm test them to make sure that they are not heartworm positive. We have families come through here. We're open every day, but Tuesday and Wednesday. We also have a website that lists our hours, tells you everything about our events. We go to Petco at Great Lakes Crossing on the 1st and 3rd Saturdays of every month. And we also go to Pet Stuff Harvest Time on the 2nd and 4th Saturdays of each month. If you'd like to visit us there, we take about 8 to 10 dogs, but the rest of the dogs are always at the kennel for you to come and visit. We always need volunteers. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. If you would ever like to come and volunteer with us, We have volunteer meetings. We tell you a little bit about us, and then you can come and volunteer with us. We would love to have you come and adopt one of our dogs. They're all listed online, or you can come and visit them. Thanks a lot.
Back on My Life with Char Sutherby, you were telling us what you guys did for fun on the farm.
There was a big, beautiful barn, and when the neighbor wasn't using it to store hay in, we could play in that barn. And so at the top of the barn, you know, there were big ropes you could swing back and forth like Tarzan, and we had slumber parties in there, and there was a well house, because when they were still farming, of course, that's where they put the milk until the milk truck would come and take it away. And there was running water in there. And then there were corn cribs, and so there was all kinds of places that kids could make forts, make houses, and play. And we were not far from a creek, not far from a swamp. In the wintertime, when the swamp was frozen over, we would take skates and go down and play. And spend the whole day down there. My brothers would start a fire, and we'd take a few potatoes or whatever down with us for lunch and stay the whole day.
Now, were you still living on the farm when you started high school?
Yes, I was.
Okay, and where did you go to high school?
McBain. And McBain is like 18 miles from where we were living. And it was a rural agricultural high school at that time. And it seemed like a huge place to us, because the elementary school had 100 kids between kindergarten and 8th grade. And when we went to McBain, there were like 40 kids in our class. That was huge.
Wow. So how far was that away from your home? Was it a long ways?
It was 18 miles.
18 miles?
Yeah.
Wow.
So we took a bus to Falmouth, got on a different bus, and went to McBain.
Okay, very good. What kind of stuff did you like to do in high school? Were you in sports? Were you in the band?
No, I wasn't in the band. I was in plays. I was a cheerleader. I loved school, and I took as many classes as I could take. I only needed 16 to graduate, but I had a lot more than that when I graduated. I loved learning.
Wow. Now, if memory serves, I think you graduated in the mid-60s like I did.
Yes.
And that, of course, was when the Vietnam War was at its heights. What kind of stuff was going through your mind about your future when all this was going on?
You know, I don't even know if I could even put words to that, other than that I felt I needed to go to college. I was just so sure that if I could go to college, everything would change for me. And I was accepted at 2 colleges. I was accepted at Northwestern and Western. And I had worked and saved my money, but I didn't have but $400 or $500. And I knew there was no money coming from home to help me, and I just wasn't sure how I was going to do that. So, as luck would have it, or not, however you want to look at it, I decided I'd just go ahead and get married, because that just seemed like a solution to me. And I did. I got married, and I married someone who was in the service and moved to North Carolina.
Okay, let's back to how did you meet your husband?
I worked in a little restaurant in Houghton Lake.
Houghton Lake?
Houghton Lake.
How did you find your way to Houghton Lake?
Well, where I grew up, Falmouth is partway between Lake City and Houghton Lake.
Oh, okay.
And I would ride with a couple different older aunts. They worked in the kitchen. I worked as a waitress. And so I would do whatever I had to do to get there.
Wow. Okay, so you meet this guy in the restaurant.
I actually worked with his mother and
Oh, you
his
did?
aunt. Yes.
Oh, so you had a little connection there.
Yeah.
Okay, and tell us what happened after that.
Well, I moved to North Carolina.
He was in the service?
He was
or?
in the service. He was a Marine. And I soon realized that I probably hadn't made the wisest of choices, but you just make the best of what you have. And again, the military would let me take free classes, so I took all the classes I could take while I was there for free. And eventually the marriage broke up, and I came back to Michigan.
Did you have
with
any
my
children?
boy.
Or?
I had a son, and his name is Alan, and I'm very proud of him. But we moved back to Houghton Lake and went to work, and I started school at Kirtland College because Kirtland opened in Roscommon, and it was or St. Helen, that was my chance to go to
Right.
school. So I worked as a waitress, was mom to Alan, and went to school at Kirtland Community College.
Okay. So so how did you get over to these parts?
My husband came in as a part of a group of construction workers that were building a drugstore in Prudenville, Michigan.
Near Houghton Lake.
Yeah. And I waited on this group, and he asked me out, and I thought, boy, well, I won't say exactly what I thought, but anyway, I did.
This is a family program.
Yes, it is. I did go out with him, and I found him to be a very nice person. And I think what scared me the most is I suddenly realized this person really, really thought a lot of me. And I was afraid that I couldn't match up to what he thought of me. I really worried about that because I don't think anybody had ever put me that high on a platform before.
Did any of this have to do with maybe a big city guy and a small town girl? Or?
Oh, yeah. And see, I hadn't seen Leonard yet, so I assumed Leonard was a big place.
But he was from Leonard then, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
He was born and raised there.
I see. And his family, I take it, goes back a long ways here.
Yes,
Is that right?
yes. His grandfather came from Rochester, Michigan to build the house that we would later buy.
Wow. And what year would that have been?
When the house was built?
Yeah.
The house was built in 1904.
So tell me what happened from Prudenville, Michigan on in this relationship.
Okay, well, we dated for a year, and I said, Dan, I have got to move. Now, are we going to get married, or am I going to move and get another place?
So you put him on the spot.
I did. And he said, we'll get married. And he said, we'll get married the last Saturday of the
He
month.
said it that quick. He didn't say, I'm going to think about this.
No.
Ah.
I said, but it's Halloween. He said, I said the last Saturday.
He didn't say
Okay.
trick or treat.
So we got married on Halloween.
Wow, isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Now, did you get married there in Prudenville?
Yes, well, not in Prudenville, but in Houghton Lake.
Ah, so you had family around you?
Yes.
And
And
that
his
sort of
family
thing.
came from here. They all came up for the wedding. It was just a small family wedding. And I moved to Leonard.
Now, did you go to college after that, or?
No, yes, I did. I mean, I was going to Kirtland. I had 2 years, not 2 full years at Kirtland. But when I met Dan, I didn't have time for Dan and college, so I gave up college. But it wasn't until our kids were older that I went back to school. Our daughter Hallie was, I want to say, 5th or 6th grade in Leonard Elementary, and I decided I was going to go to Oakland Community College.
Wow. We're going to stop you right there because we got a lot more to talk about, because now it's time to talk about Char Sutherby in Leonard, Michigan, and there's a big story to tell with that. So we're going to have a part 2 to this, and I hope you rejoin us for that. Thanks for joining us on My Life, and we will see you next time.
Hi everyone, don't forget you can purchase DVDs of your favorite shows from OCTV, whether it's Minutes by Minute, Our Community Access, or Connie's Kitchen. Just call the station. Our number is 248-628-9658. Enjoy watching all of our shows on OCTV.